Is your company page built to grow? In today's episode, the 4 C's will tell you. G'day everyone, it's Michelle J. Raymond back again to talk about all things LinkedIn company pages, and more importantly, is your company page set up for growth? How do you tell? I've been working with clients for around 6 years on all things company pages. And no matter the size of the company, the size of the team that looks after it, the experience of the marketer that is managing the company page, or the social media manager or agency that's taking care of it, I keep seeing the same patterns emerge. So I thought in today's episode that I would share with you my 4 C's framework so you can figure out whether your company page has been set up for success and growth, or if it's kind of stagnant and doomed for failure. I don't really think that anybody's page is really doomed that badly, but honestly, there are some pretty bad examples of company pages out there that if they followed my framework and have a look into the 4 C's, they could easily fix it. So I'm going to share what are the 4 C's, how you can implement them into your LinkedIn strategy quickly and easily, and really start getting growth for your page. Sounds like a plan? What does built for growth actually mean? Well, by my definition, I'm looking at a system that you can implement. So not just one tactic here or there, but how they all come together to really get you those results that your business is after. The results that you're after can vary. That doesn't matter, but it is really important that you have a goal that you're chasing, because otherwise, how are you going to know if this is actually working? And so for me, I am always going to come back to strategy first. The answer, if your page isn't growing and delivering results, is never going to be post more. It is always going to be fix the system. If the answer is fix the system, you need to be able to have a tool to diagnose what the problems are. And that's why I created the 4 C's framework for your company page. What are the 4 C's? Glad that you asked. They are clarity, content, community, and cadence. And we're going to go into each of those, and I'm going to explain it a little bit more as to how these apply back to your page. And more importantly, think about what small actions you can take after you listen to this podcast that can really put this into action, because none of this matters if we don't go away and actually put it into action. So we're going to go through each of those things, why I think that they'll make a difference. Let's talk about the first C, clarity. And what clarity means in this framework is we need to define who the page is for and who owns it. I can guarantee you that most company pages have been handed down from page manager to page manager, sometimes internal, sometimes external agencies. And honestly, I don't think anyone ever even realizes where this thing started or where it's going. So number one, is there a clear owner? Who in the team is responsible for the page? And this might sound Captain Obvious, and it should be, but I work with so many teams where there's multiple people in the team. They could be spread between a global office and regional offices, or even interstate. I have sat in a meeting where I said, who owns the page? And everybody just looked at each other because there was no one owner that was responsible for the success. So make sure that you've got that sorted. Okay. Now, I know you're probably sitting there going, really, Michelle? Are we starting back at the basics? Yeah, absolutely we are, because if we don't have these foundations right, it doesn't matter about any of the complex or cool stuff that we can do later. So the other thing that we want to define when it comes to clarity is the audience that your page is targeting. Again, you might think, oh, that's obvious. Is it? If I don't know your brand or your products and I come to your company page, can I easily tell that I'm your target audience? So you could take a look at things like your banner, your about section, the content that you're posting. Is it really defined, or are you trying to be everything to everyone? And I think most pages are trying to sell to as many people as possible, the bigger the pool. And I think that's why content never really resonates with people that are consuming it, because ultimately it's like, it's a bit bland, a bit boring, and a bit just for everybody. So go and define your audience. That leads us into the second C, which is content. Now, content is something that everybody jumps to and thinks that that's the secret to success. And yes, it can be if we've done the first C and got that clarity sorted. So if you haven't done that work, go back and start there. A lot of teams also think that their problem is that they don't have enough creativity. But realistically, I think the actual problem is designing the system. So it can be as simple as, do you have a content calendar in place? Have you planned your 2 or 3 posts per week for your page and not just creating them ad hoc? Now we're creating them around that defined audience and not around the business. Big difference there. Is the content that you're creating, do you have employee ready posts? Like, are these posts that if they go out on the company page that your employees will want to engage with? Or are they kind of silently cringing in the background, afraid to actually engage because they don't really want their name to be seen with it? So think about that. Also under content, I love a good system, and we are going to be talking about what happens with a really simple advocacy playbook. So your employees not only know when the page is going to post, but they should be keeping an eye out for it. And of course, we're asking for the team to help support the page by either commenting or resharing it with their audience, or just in general, even if they engage in any small way. If they don't know how, and they certainly haven't been told why it's important, then this is something, again, that often falls over. The power of 2 works really well only when everybody knows what's going on with the company brand and how they can use their personal brands to support it. The other thing that I want you to take a look at when it comes to content, and the thing that falls over the most, is often the call to action on your post. Is it you're always wanting somebody to engage with the post and go off onto your own website or an external link, and you are always trying to get something in return from them? I want you to think, how is it that we can get more creative with our call to actions on our post rather than sending people off to try and consume more and more and more? We know that if we overuse too much lead generation tactics on our company page and not enough thought leadership tactics, and I've done some podcast episodes on this previously. If you want the details, just reach out and I'm happy to share them. But think about it. One post gets one call to action of what you want people to do. Is that to follow the page? Is that to comment on the post? Is it to visit an external website? Or is it to save? Don't try and confuse people by giving them too much all at once and confusing them. The third C is all about community. And community is so important when it comes to the growth of your company page. Growth on LinkedIn will always be human before it's corporate. I'm not here to try and change anybody's opinion on that. It is absolutely the way it should be. And when we're talking about community in terms of company pages, what are some of the signals that you should be taking a look at to see whether your page is set up for growth? Number 1, I'm going to say, is consistent visuals. Will I be able to easily recognize in the feed that this particular post is related back to your brand? Now, this is something that you may think is immediately obvious, but if I was to take your logo off, would it still be the case? And the last thing we want to make sure that we're checking is, does it now just look like one of your competitors' posts with different colors? I'm going to say the answer probably 9 times out of 10 here is it absolutely does. So we've got some work to do in this space. Let's talk about comments as pages. It's a really big opportunity in 2026 for page admins to make sure that they're implementing page advocacy and getting the page out there and actively commenting. When I'm doing company page audits with teams, this is something that I'm definitely looking at. Quite often it can be a confidence play because the person that's managing the page and creating the content isn't always a subject matter expert or well-known in the industry and may not feel confident. So think about, what can you create to help that person in that role? How else can we get your page to grow when it comes to community on your page? Your leadership has to be visible. Honestly, if you're a business leader expecting great results and growth from your LinkedIn company page, you need to come in and be a part of this action just as much as the team looking after it and managing the page. Even more so, because quite often the people at the top have often been in the industry the longest or are very well connected. And you get that certain level of authority that comes just because of your title within the business. It's just how we're built. It's the way the world works. So getting leaders to actually engage and leading by example is a really great way for the power of two to come together under this C of community. How else can we check that the page is set up for growth when it comes to community? In this particular aspect, I'd also like you to check, is the content that you're putting out featuring employees, like real people, not just your products, not just your press releases, not just the business results. Are there real humans of your business showing in the content? And this one, I think, is the quickest and easiest win that you can honestly have out of this whole episode today. If you were to make one simple swap and include the faces of your employees more often than not in your content, I promise you, your reach, engagement, and all the metrics that you want to measure success on will definitely go up. If I was to look back at almost every audit that I've done, the teams that implemented this after we finished working together are the ones that actually grew the most. They weren't the flashiest. They didn't have the biggest teams or the fancy equipment. They highlighted their people. And so that's why when it comes to community, don't overlook this as a growth tactic. Let's go to the fourth C, and that is cadence. Now, cadence can relate to the activities that you're taking, and I honestly believe that if they're in somebody's calendar as time set aside and prioritized, this actually makes life much easier for the person rather than having to try and remember to do everything. And you may have other tools that you use for reminders, and that's totally fine as well. But the point is, set time aside to make sure that these activities happen consistently. The most important thing that I think you can set aside time for when it comes to growing your LinkedIn company page and making sure that it is generating opportunities for the brand. And that is to make sure that you have some kind of basic reporting rhythm. So are you going back and taking a look at the analytics? And we've got a bunch of new analytics that are coming through for company pages right now. So things like you can see how often your content has been saved, whether it's been reshared. Did it generate, visitors? Did your post generate more page followers? These are the types of analytics that are coming through. That's one piece of the puzzle. But I also think the other piece of the puzzle that's important is your demographics. Is your content talking to that identified audience that we did back in the first C? Clarity. That is how you know that you have done the work up front, that you're attracting that ideal audience, and everything is paying off. Where do I think that you should start with the 4 C's? Obviously, clarity, as I've mentioned. And if you're someone that has been listening to the podcast and you're in the car or at the gym or somewhere where you don't have access to be able to write some of these things down, go across, connect with me on LinkedIn, and subscribe to my LinkedIn newsletter. Every week when the podcast goes live, a newsletter goes out that also has a recap of everything that I've spoken about. And all of this will be included in that newsletter. So thank you for listening to the podcast or watching over on YouTube if you prefer that way. But the recap always every single week is in my LinkedIn newsletter. I look forward to hearing from some of you when you reach out and connect with me. I say it all the time. It's my favorite thing when I know that you're a listener and we get to stay connected over on LinkedIn so I can have a two-way conversation with you. The 4 C's that we've gone through today, we've got clarity, we've got content, we've got community, and we've got cadence. Pick which one of these things is really going to make the biggest difference for your business. And you probably only need to implement maybe 2 or 3 out of the 11 things that I've actually covered in today's episode. So start with those 3 things, get them up and running, and then look for other opportunities for your page really to level up and do things that other pages in your industry just aren't doing. As I wrap up today's episode, there may be some of you that have been thinking, this all seems pretty obvious, Michelle. Is this really the thing that's going to make a difference for my company page to grow? And the answer, my friends, is it absolutely is. I've been doing company page audits for 6 years, working with clients all over the world. And the growth that I see comes from doing the foundational steps, the strategic steps really well and consistently over time is where the biggest difference comes. And what do you know? It is never anything flash. It's certainly never a crazy hack. It is getting back to fundamentals. If you need some help figuring out whether your page is on track and following those fundamentals, often my clients say it's great to have an independent set of eyes take a look. An outsider looking in can often give you a very different view than what you can see yourself as being part of that ecosystem internally. So I'm going to drop the details for my company page audit and strategy sessions into the show notes, and feel free to check that out. And if you want to have a free 15-minute intro call with me, if you've got some questions, book one on the website, no problems at all. So until next week, cheers.